But Dominic, it all starts with that main event for UFC San Antonio. Let's see that odds on the screen. Marlon Vera plus 140, taking on Cory Sandhagen minus 165. However, Marlon Vera, number third ranked bantamweight in the world, Cory Sandhagen, number five. So top five matchup, a amazing main event. Clearly has a lot of stakes to this talent stacked bantamweight division. You already mentioned we had another big fight in that division just 2 weeks ago where Murav Dvalishvili put on the performance of his life and dominated the former champion Petr Yan. So, Dominic, a question for you to kind of start here. We sort of know that Marlon Vera has a lot at stake here. I mean, he is clearly, in the title picture. He is in the mix. He feels
Yeah.
like one of those guys that is one away,
Yeah.
even though we kind of have a few guys that feel like they're one away.
Also
So
true.
the motivation is obviously there for Marlon Vera. What does this fight mean for Cory Sandhagen? Like, where does he really fall in your eyes in the current bantamweight division, the current title picture? How far away is he from putting himself back into a title shot?
Yeah, it's honestly crazy, man. We literally have everyone outside of Aljamain is one win away from a title shot, it feels like, at bantamweight. It's just so sick right now, this division. For Cory, it's interesting, though, especially with a loss, because then we're talking 3 out of his last 4 being losses. Now, yes, they would all be to top level competition. It would be Marlon Vera, it would be Petr Yan, and it would be TJ Dillashaw. You could argue that he beat TJ Dillashaw, and even in the Petr Yan fight, very close, very competitive, fantastic fight. My favorite fight of all of 2021. Cory Sandhagen is always competing and in close fights. And Marlon Vera, kind of the same. Like, yeah, he finds ways to pull away big, but they always start pretty close, and then he kind of edges his way. So when these two clash, it makes it very exciting. But I will say this, Noah, if Cory were to lose here, I feel like, we've called for him to get that step back just so it doesn't, like, you don't want all these losses to number one contenders to build up on your resume
Mhm.
because, yeah, like, it's against top level guys, but if you're not beating them, it's hard to put you into that title shot. So if he does lose here, I think we do need to see that legitimate step back to, like, number 10 and backwards in a next fight. But that's all basically a Monday conversation, but that's just how I feel going in. So I do think just as much is on the line here for Cory Sandhagen as there is for Marlon Vera. Because if Marlon wins, that's a title shot. That's 5 straight wins against incredible opponents. So it's almost like in two different kind of aspects, because I feel like if Marlon loses to Cory, it's not as detrimental as Cory losing to Marlon. So that's my thoughts. That's where my head's at in terms of the storylines heading in. What do you got for me?
That's very fair assessment. I do feel like we said a lot of the same things about Cory Sandhagen when he fought Song Yadong his last time out.
Mm,
Of course, at that time, he was coming off back to back losses. Um, Even more so, a reason for him to get a win. So that way we didn't have to push him to the, fighting
mm-hmm.
backwards and stuff. And then he gets a win there and he looked great. I mean, he looked
Yeah.
absolutely awesome. Him and Song Yadong had a great fight, but per usual with Cory Sandhagen, he won it out with the volume, but also Dominic,
Man.
he had a little more zip on those punches. He
Yeah.
packed a little more of a punch, and truthfully, I thought in a lot of ways his conditioning and his ability to take a shot better. Just he had a better ability to withstand punishment. Song
Mm,
Yadong, he wanted to keep going, but his body just told him no.
yeah.
I believe the eye had swollen up and he
Mm-hmm.
couldn't see out of
Mm-hmm.
it. So that's sort of what ended things. But he looked great. So I guess he is still kind of in a vulnerable position because the problem isn't really the loss. Like it's not that he's losing. Like yeah, that's not
Right.
good.
Right.
But it's the fact that the people he's lost to, like TJ Dillashaw retired. So okay, there you go. But Petr Yan, another loss, and then you had Aljamain Sterling. I believe
Yep.
those are his 3 UFC losses. Aljamain's the champion. Petr Yan also in a weird spot, but you know because of that, like it does kind of feel like he has a little bit more room to work with. I mean, this is one of the fresh matchups for him though in that top
Yep.
five. Like that's what
Yep.
makes it so important, is because who knows when he would get an opportunity to fight someone like Sean O'Malley or Marab? Do you
Right.
even want to fight either one of those guys? Like, it's not exactly an easy fight either way. So he has to kind of take advantage of these fresh matchups for him, so that, as you say, I think that's more the bigger problem here. If the losses continue to pile up and it's people who are still going to remain relevant in
Yes.
that bantamweight division for the next 2, 3, 4 years, it's hard to get that win back all the time. Like, it's not
Yep.
easy to get back into a rematch scenario. Not everybody gets a Leon Edwards situation where they claw their way back, and look at all he had to go through to get that title fight in the first
Right.
place. So, um, with that being said, though, I'm going to tell you why I'm betting on Marlon Vera in this fight,
Okay. Please do.
because I did take him money line plus 140. I do believe this fight's very close. I believe it's like razor thin close.
Yeah. Yeah.
I expect this to be mostly a striking affair, and I think it's going to be glorious. I think it's going to be very
Mm-hmm.
fun. I don't
Mm-hmm.
expect a quick finish when you have these two guys. I just don't see that happening. By the way, did you realize this is Marlon Vera's 21st UFC bout? I mean,
It really is wild.
yeah, guy under the radar for so many years, and then he's really just. But I don't want to say. I feel like that's an overused comparison for me at this point to call him like another version of Charles Oliveira. But in some ways, he is. Like, but even he didn't have near the expectations Charles had when he was on his struggle.
Yeah.
Marlon Vera
He's
was
only
just like,
30.
yeah. That's even crazier. With that being said, I'm taking Marlon Vera money line. Biggest reason comes down to, I know this is it's a fresh matchup. The type of striking, the volume with which Cory Sandhagen throws with is not necessarily something Marlon Vera has been accustomed to at that level. Same could be said for the power of Marlon Vera against Cory Sandhagen and the durability mixed in with that.
For sure. For
And
sure.
Marlon Vera is very patient as well. He's willing to go down in a fight in order to pick his shot later. Did that with Dominic Cruz, I believe, and Frankie Edgar. So I think
Yes.
it benefits Marlon Vera this being a 5-round fight, because Corey does come out pretty fast, um, and puts a lot of volume into his strike. So he's able to build off having kind of a striking lead on you. But I will just say, and again, MMA math doesn't really work, but I'm just going to look at the fact Cory Sandhagen's last 2 losses, which did go the full distance, full 5 rounds, he outstruck both Peter Yan and TJ Dillashaw. I know the Dillashaw one's controversial for that reason, because
Mm-hmm.
most of Dillashaw's work was done in the clinch, up against the fence.
Yeah.
He was, I think he had torn his ACL, right, for that
Yeah.
during that fight. So, but the Yan one, he did outstrike him as well. Pretty close, but still outstruck him and lost. You look at Marlon Vera, who one of the fights that stuck out to me was his Rob Font main event.
For sure.
Rob Font, it was the biggest, I believe, in UFC history, the biggest single fight striking differential where the loser had more strikes than the winner. It's kind of a
Right.
weird record to word properly. But essentially, Rob Font, I believe, over doubled Marlon Vera's strikes for that fight. And yet Marlon Vera won 4 of the 5 rounds.
And it felt so clear, even as a
Yeah,
fan, that he had won.
completely. Because the
Yeah.
power shots of Vera were the difference. He
Yeah.
picks his shots so well. He's methodical in his approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it has worked out for him up to this point. Now, he is going up against Cory Sandhagen, who I think is at this point, I would say he's better than Rob Font. I would say
Yeah.
he's better at this point than Dominic Cruz, even though I still think Dominic Cruz being a little bit slept on in the division.
Yep.
I would say he's better than Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar, of course, retired.
Yes.
So because of that, can Marlon Vera come back from being down here? Because I do think that's what's going to happen. I do think he probably drops this first round. Is he able to be losing half a round and do what he kind of did to Rob Font, where he lands a massive barrage of shots and is able to drop him, hurt him, whatever, show the visible wear and tear? That's really what made the difference there. So if he can't do that, if he can't find those opportunities to really show the judges the kind of damage he's inflicting, big shots, big moments, it might be a tough fight for him to get a win on. It might be one of those decisions where Vera has his moments, but ultimately Sandhagen just builds up too much of a lead and is too durable for even Vera to put away. But I'm sort of banking on him being able to pick those shots well enough to where he will make the most of them. And for Cory, he starts out hot, and I'm not going to say he slows down or gasses out, but I feel like where Cory starts and where Vera start, they reverse by the end of the fight. Like
Hmm.
Cory starts out hot, Vera starts out a little more patient. By the end of the fight, you got Sandhagen who's going to be slightly more reluctant, while Vera's the one that's going to be pushing the pace. That's how I see it going. If it was a 3-round fight, I would have not near the
Yeah.
confidence in Marlon Vera here. But due to the circumstances, due to the 5 rounds, and the fact that he's plus money, pretty decent plus money. If the odds were reversed, I'd probably take Cory Sandhagen and be trying to convince you guys now why I thought that was a good idea. But as it stands, that is my reason for Marlon Vera. Dominic, anything that you feel differently about this matchup on? Is there anything I'm missing from these guys in terms of their X's and O's?
No, I think that's great. And odds aside, let's talk about a narrative here that you just discussed. It almost sounds oh so familiar to one Peter Yan, does it not? Someone that starts down, starts a little slower, and will then analyze, make the adjustments, pull ahead in the later rounds, which is exactly what Peter Yan did against Cory Sandhagen. Now, the biggest difference between Vera and Yan is the way in which they strike, because
Yeah.
Vera, a lot more kick heavy, a lot more power even than what Peter Yan presents. So the power discrepancy does separate them, but the way that they start slow, they try to pick shots. Where will it get me in rounds 3, 4, 5 are very similar here. And being that we've seen Cory lose a fight in that matter to Peter Yan, not necessarily a tit for tat blueprint here for Vera, but you got to think for him mentally going in that he knows over the course of 5 rounds, I can do something that someone else has already done to Sandhagen. This fight is just electric, man. And it speaks volumes to how great 135 pounds is right now in the UFC. It's the best division in MMA right now in the UFC, undoubtedly, I think for sure. And this is beautiful. And maybe this is more of a Monday conversation too, just because of so many heavy things, right? But don't you at least feel that if Marlon Vera wins here and makes it 5 in a row, with big steps up in competition each step of the way. Not to mention he has a win over Sean O'Malley as well, who's number 1 right now.
That's true.
It feels like the man has earned a title fight, but with 2 other people that have also done the same thing. Like, what do you make of that for Vera? Does it almost like kind of for him make it not less important, but just like, oh man, like I can have a really good win here and maybe it still won't matter. Like, what do you kind of make of this situation?
Well, it makes me confident he's really going to go for it here. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's
Yeah.
really going for it. If you see some of the comments he made this week, he was being pretty real, as he's one to do. I mean, he's Cheeto, right? He's a fucking boss. And
Yeah.
when he was speaking to the media some this week, he said things like, he was talking about the UFC rankings. I don't give a
I
fuck
saw
about
that.
the UFC rankings. Like,
Yeah.
they can give a guy who's ranked number 10 a title shot. I got to go out there and earn it, basically. So, and he said he's fine with that. And I think that added motivation is only going to thrive him here. This is a guy who 21 fights, well, it'll be 21 fights after Saturday. 20 fights in is just now starting to get the respect that he
Yeah.
has deserved
Yeah.
for probably much longer than that. He's really coming to his own. He's put it all together. Now's the time. For a guy like that who remembers probably being that guy that was curtain jerking a lot of cards early on in his career, who was probably making very little money in in terms of the UFC, I'm sure he remembers that. And with a guy like that, you look at this as like, if I lose, I might risk going back to that. So
Yeah.
that's just, again, these guys are built completely different. He's at a point where he probably feels he's in a more fragile position than he actually is, which again,
Yeah.
I think is just going to add more motivation to him to go in there and get that win, or at least really go for it. I don't think he's going to hold back. I think
Yeah.
by the end
Yeah.
of it, Cory Sandhagen could very well win this fight. But I don't think we're going to say Marlon Vera is going to look at the tape and wish he had done more. I really don't think so. I think if Cory Sandhagen wins, it's because he was the better man on that night. No questions asked.
Yeah, dude, a win here for either guy, it's not coming easy. It's going to be a scratch, claw, dogfight, either side of the coin. That's why it's wonderful.
Good touch on a good point, by the way. You kind of mentioned it in passing about the leg kicks, though, because that could be a really big weapon here for Vera.
With the
You know, he's
movement of
leg kick
Cory,
heavy.
yeah.
And of course, he likes to keep himself at a leg kicking distance because of that. Cory Sandhagen, also a guy who kind of likes to fight from range. But in order to win this fight, I feel like Cory's going to have to get more in the pocket, which again opens him up to a lot of those power shots from Marlon Vera. That's just, I'm glad you reminded me of that. That was another point that I had in my head of like, yes, this is going to rationale my bet on Marlon Vera. That will probably not hit, but that's okay. I will also mention I do have a leg of a parlay with this fight on it. That's for this fight to start round 4. So
Okay.
I do see that this fight going a little bit longer. Of course, there's a chance anything can happen, but both guys, durability on both these guys' sides to really turn this into a dogfight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it ends before the championship rounds. I just don't.
No, I agree.